And now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
Hello and welcome to Tape Talk, a video series from Overlapping Dialogue. Episode 2 we're working on now, where Levi and I'm Kyle by the way,
and I'm Levi,
are going to be discussing some selections from our VHS collection. As we talked about last time, we love Blu-ray and 4K and DVD as much as anyone, but we recently got back into collecting VHS, watching VHS, and we thought we would give you a little peek behind the curtain of some of the movies that we have, and talk about what those movie significances are to us, along with, why specifically maybe we wanted to seek them out in the VHS format. As well as, at the very end, stick around, we're going to pair some of those movies together and talk about how they might even work together as hypothetical future episodes of our podcast, which you can find here on YouTube as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, really wherever you find your podcasts. Anything to add to that, Levi? No? We're good? Why don't you go ahead and get us started here with what your selection
so I guess you would have probably seen the first episode by now, so you kind of know how this goes. But my first one, I bought this.
And by the way, if you hear cicadas, we're here in western North Carolina, and so you might hear those in the background.
I bought this one about a year ago or so, Reefer Madness. I've never seen this as of yet, which is funny because it's very short at 67 minutes. Very infamous and especially kind of beloved in the drug community as a anti-drug movie from 1936.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe or watch case.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Of course, if you're afraid.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide, and the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important film now, before it is too late.
It's interesting because, it's very much a proto, something weird video kind of release, as far as like something weird video being obsessed with the Michael Vraney kind of boutique released originally VHSs.
You showed me some of that stuff too. We watched on Blu-ray. It's really cool.
Mainly
DVD. They got their start, I guess, back.
They started on VHS, but of putting out trashy stuff. I mean, it was literally Something Weird videos named after the Herschel Gordon Lewis movie Something Weird, which is a very interesting movie I've seen. But it's basically just an anti-marijuana movie made in the 30s, which is weird because we don't think of that as much as a early. I mean, it was for the jazz cigarette era of being a thing in urban communities, but I love this cover because it says, "Here's a roadside weed that's fast becoming a national highway," and it's in that like very rustic, weird old font. But I'll read the back here. It says, "Don't pass up a chance to see this pioneer effort in the government's anti-marijuana campaign. Made in 1936 in close collaboration with the FBI, Reefer Madness depicts, in now hilarious fashion, how one puff of pot can lead clean-cut teenagers down the road to insanity and death. The film was originally intended to educate about the horrors of narcotics, but in this more enlightened age, you'll most certainly find Reefer Madness a real hoot." It's funny, they're like, and this more enlightened age. Like,
it's not so bad.
Yeah, marijuana is great, which we're not supporters of the marijuana lobby, so sorry.
Yeah.
Not really. But anyway, and it also has who all was in it on the back. This is a Good Times home video, which was famous. I haven't rewound this one yet.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody got a ways through, and then they wanted to go take a hit.
And then the munchies hit, and then...
this is one of those movies that, like I said, so infamous in the community of
it's now watched ironically very much so.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to see this just because of its fame. There were some other ones similar to that around that time too, but I don't remember their names, but that's the more famous
Some other
one.
things it says here on the cover you might can see. One moment of bliss. I can't quite see what that said. Maybe it says leads to a lifetime of regret.
Yeah.
Then also hunting a thrill. They inhaled a drag of concentrated sin. So again, this movie's kind of watched ironically now. It's interesting to think of this as a 30s movie because I know, of course, marijuana existed long before this time, but I always associate more recreational use of marijuana happening in the 1960s, where it was becoming even more common then. So it's interesting to think about it back in the 30s.
And then you had seen that rash of drug movies in the early 70s, like Panic in Needle Park, and there was one I had never heard of that I heard of the other day that had George Segal in it, and he was like hooked on heroin, and I was like, okay, yeah.
I think the science is definitely out there. The heroin is infinitely worse.
And
than
so that
marijuana.
was something they were already realizing by then. And then you had cocaine made a big comeback in the 80s, and you had all the drug movies then and the drug trade, and so this is before all of that. So we had seen obviously Amazon Women on the Moon,
which we did a podcast of not too long ago. Check that out.
We kind of talked about, maybe brought this up a little bit, but especially the ending of the Paul Bartel section, which is like a social disease thing. It's basically Reefer Madness, but not.
Yeah, Joe Dante did that in particular.
But so I picked this one, like I said, I bought it because it's VHS. I feel like it fits what it is anyway. So, yeah.
That's not something...
I think it might be, I don't know this for sure, it might be in the public domain, so it's pretty easy to find.
Pretty sure it is. The whole thing's probably on YouTube. You could find it. Yeah, but yeah, this is definitely a curiosity that I've been wanting to see for a while. Yeah. So, again, as someone who doesn't smoke pot, I'm still fascinated by it. This is a cultural
and we're probably going to
artifact.
laugh at it, but also not laugh at it as much as druggies do, and just be like, yeah, that's probably not a good thing, but okay, so whatever.
It is interesting too that obviously it would have been imagined essentially as like a PSA movie, but it was coming in the midst of like the Warner Brothers crime drama kind of. And I say this is a huge fan of these movies, but like the preachiness of some of those movies sometimes, and so
it looks like the poster of like The Lady Killer with James Cagney. There's certain posters that look similar, so yeah, you're right about that.
Now for something completely different. My Favorite Martian from, what exactly is the year?
It's in the early 2000s.
Yeah, perhaps very, very, very late 90s. I can't quite remember what year it is. Let
me see.
This is, of course, an adaptation of the TV series way back when, I think in the 60s. And this was, for us, one of those classic kids movies that we saw a lot growing up. As far as what the story's about, it's a pretty standard fish out of water comedy.
It's a movie adaptation of the TV show.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. Yeah, and
okay. Yeah, I'm not paying attention. Sorry.
And so obviously Christopher Lloyd, who's not averse to playing kind of in these situations. I mean, obviously this is different than Back to the Future, but it's like him kind of in a fish out of water-ish situation where he's the eccentric kind of the duo here. Of course, Jeff Daniels, who's great in everything. He can do comedy, drama equally well.
I think I do like Christopher Lloyd in the movie, but I feel like Jeff Daniels actually wins the movie as being actually pretty funny. Which he's usually that way anyway, you know.
Out of This World, that was from American Urban Radio Network. The Martian has landed. There goes the neighborhood.
Where's that? There's that guy that was in the original show that's in this, and I can't remember his name. Ray Walston.
Ray Walston.
Who's in like a ton of stuff. He was in.
We
already talked about him in Addams Family Reunion.
Yes.
And then he was in The Sting. He was in.
He's a teacher in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah, right.
That's probably. That and that honestly is probably, other than the My Favorite Martian TV show, is the thing he's most remembered for. Then he actually canonically plays his character from the show as an undercover government agent who's actually secretly an alien, which is revealed at the end. He's not in a whole lot of this, but he's in a little bit.
Cameo role.
But as you said, him in Family Reunion, he's hilarious.
So we already talked about that. But also he was in Of Mice and Men, the movie version from the 90s with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich. He's pretty good in that.
Also, Elizabeth Hurley, who's in the Austin Powers movies, is in this.
Oh, and of course, Wayne Knight as Suit.
Yes, is his suit, the voice of the suit, which I thought was creative. It was like the suit is kind of a being and is kind of being narrated.
And that feels very like Disney 90s, like there has to be a sidekick, and so it was different for that, I think. He has that great moment we laugh about all the time where he's trying to get that one older lady that's the neighbor to be quiet. And he's like, the baby's sleeping.
Yeah. And of course, Christopher Lloyd and her have and that's the mom from Richie Rich.
Yeah. She's randomly made to look older in that than she is. Yeah. But in this, I mean. But,
I know in Richie Rich, she has that moment where she's like, or towards the end, where they have that big Mount Rushmore area, but their family, and they chop off some of her nose with that big laser that they have, the villains. And she's like, oh my God, I look like Michael Jackson. So 90s. Anyways,
it's also an added thing of that's weird is that then Macaulay Culkin is right there, and it's like this whole extra. Like,
so I mean, the story of this is pretty standard. I do randomly like that this is kind of set in like specifically like I think it was Santa Barbara.
It was Southern California.
Yeah, and so it was kind of just a little bit of a different thing. Again, this movie is hardly revolutionary. It's pretty standard Disney fare, but it's just I would say this is actually a movie that we grew up with. We watched it on Disney Plus some time back, and I thought it held up pretty good. I mean, as just a kid's
we watched it during COVID, I remember, right when that was going on, and we had just kind of were going through some Disney Plus stuff.
We watched,
there was the great scene where they shrink the car and it goes down. Oh, Wallace Shawn's in this too. I forgot.
Right.
And he's like one of the hunters of the aliens or whatever.
Yeah.
And they get the roto-rooter out and they're trying to suck the car back up out of the sewer because it's free.
Oh, we're in trouble. Maximum thrust. What? Stand on it, stand. Oh. We're gonna crash. I think not.
Shoot it! Come on!
They're shooting at us! Quick! Back in that garage! What garage? There! Hang on! Tim! Why are we stopping? They're right there!
Get me that thing over there. We're gonna flush them out.
I dropped it! What? You dropped what? My molecular compressor! Here. Use this. This won't work! No, use it to find it. Oh.
That'll do very nicely. Now get it in there.
Miss! I found it!
We got them now.
Hello! I see it!
Faster!
It's getting closer! I'm going as fast as I can! I'm not gonna be fast enough! Martin! Martin, up ahead! We're trapped! Quick, make it smaller! We're not gonna make it! Hang on! Are we clear? Oh, I think we did it! I see light ahead!
Where the heck are we?
Hey, Elma, where's my new Field and Stream?
It's in the bathroom, right where you left it.
Oh, yeah, I see it now. By the way, where's my tuna sandwich?
You want it in there?
Oh! Why'd I eat that fourth burrito?
Do it. Do it now.
And they go into the toilet bowl, and that really overweight guy's like going in
Why
there.
did I
like,
eat my
that fourth burrito?
burrito.
Yeah, and they're like, do it now.
Yeah.
But they literally like make the car then go big and crash through. Like that would have killed that guy definitely. Obviously, it's
Right.
so dumb.
Yeah.
But
So
there's a great needle drop in this movie too, where he eats ice cream and decides he's going to stay up all night. And I can't remember the song, what it's called, but it's that na, 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 like that, and then, like, a great needle drop in that scene.
Yeah.
Is great.
So
yes, it's actually
that's a fun movie. I think
well,
most of it mostly because of just these two
Yeah.
and their chemistry
Right,
in it.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think everybody would have known making this, like, if that relationship doesn't work, then it's not going to be a good movie. So My Favorite Martian.
Yeah, and it was made, you know, at the time of a lot of those movies that were like adapting TV shows from like Leave It to Beaver.
Oh, that's another thing too.
Adam's
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that in the
Family,
90s in general.
And so this was
I
a
didn't
more
think about
random
that.
one
Yeah.
that's like nobody really asked for this, but was it direct to video?
No, I think
It
it was
was in
in
theaters?
theaters,
Okay.
I believe.
'Cause
it's pretty well made and got a
Right.
decent enough number of
You
stars.
remember that kid on the back that's got the little it's like Anakin Skywalker and like, in that era, Padawan era.
That's true though.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of that going on in the 90s, and this is more of a random one. But
yeah,
I'd recommend this. My Favorite Martian from whenever.
Yeah. Well, we
I
don't
can't
know.
remember exactly what year. I will
don't
check my
know.
phone, but it's
Yeah.
currently shooting
Yeah,
it. So
I could check it, but I'm not going to.
no, we like the basking in our own ignorance.
So this one I've talked with you about this movie for years about wanting to get this on home video. This pretty famous movie called Them, which is about ants, giant ants, giant ant movie. I actually randomly saw this movie. I remember the weekend that Prometheus came out back in like 2012.
Yeah,
or was that 2011?
I think it's 2012.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, because I had just finished 8th grade around that time.
Perfect movie to see as an 8th grader. You know, around that
Yeah,
time, I feel like.
but like I had seen this movie on DVD. The DVD of this used to randomly be like $20, regular DVD, like back in the late 2000s, early 2010s on Amazon. That was the original Amazon days.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this movie like it's great. I don't even really remember a whole lot about it.
I tell you, gentlemen, science has agreed that unless something is done and done quickly, man, as the dominant species of life on Earth, will be extinct within a year. Of the President of the United States, stay in your homes. I repeat, stay in your homes. Your personal safety, the safety of the entire city, depends upon your full cooperation with the military authorities.
Yes, cities, nations, even civilization itself, threatened with annihilation because in one moment of history-making violence, nature, mad, rampant, wrought its most awesome creation. For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust, were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous. There is no word to describe them.
We may be witnesses to a biblical prophecy come true, and there shall be destruction and darkness come up in creation, and the beast shall reign over the earth.
Yes, the earth, the skies above and the seas below, infested by swarms of nightmare creatures, crueler, deadlier than the armored giants of prehistoric eras. Here is a wild, headlong flight into terror as the desert erupts with the grim battle for survival. Here is a fear-frenzied moment of suspense as mankind totters before a thing that multiplies faster than it can be killed. Here is a desperate plunge into the black depths of the earth, where human courage challenges the brute force, the slashing jaws, the poison fangs that guard the subterranean nest where the beast spawns its terrible progeny.
To all units, condition red. Drain 267 is the target area. Repeat, condition red. Drain 267 is the target area.
Is there any type of gas we could use?
No, we can't take a chance. It might poison the whole city.
Just very much the atomic age unleashes nature's hordes. I mean, it's literally, and like, it doesn't really have anyone in it that is memorable.
Which was sometimes common of some of these lower budget B movies.
I've seen Edmund Gwynn in something though, and I can't remember what it is. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty well made. I mean, the most memorable thing about it is the ending when they go into the LA River, which of course is like empty. That's the oldest movie I'm aware of that uses the LA River, because so much stuff does.
There might be something predating that, but that would be earlier.
Because this was made in the 50s, 54. Yeah. Now there probably
Year of our
was
father's birth,
but yeah. I thought you were talking about God or Jesus for a second. I was like,
no,
more before that. But,
no. This is one of those, like, I've not even haven't seen this.
Yeah.
This is kind of one of the living, and I say this lovingly, like, embodiments or stereotypes of 50s.
Like this.
Atomic age. I mean, it says
Tarantula, Attack of the
movies.
50-Foot Woman. Now, you've seen Tarantula.
Yes.
We watched that.
Yeah.
I'm going to feed you to my tarantula. But yeah, this one, I remember it also, other than being in the LA River, it goes into the tunnels.
Oh, okay.
And there's, like, stuff of them trying to fight the ants in those, like, tunnel areas. And it's pretty interesting. I don't like this cover. The original poster of this, if you've never seen it, is great. It's like red, and it's got the ant and the people, and it's really good. This one sucks.
I will say though, and you see this with a lot of Warner Brothers VHSs this time. I really like the back design of it. They kind of have that standard font that they used, and I like the back side of this. But I agree, the cover.
What do you think about the title? I feel like there's some work that needs to be done there.
Yeah, and, there is a part of me that think about, like, The Thing with this, which is The Thing from Another World, the original one from the 50s, which, of course, was remade by Carpenter in the 80s. So just the there kind of makes me leap to thinking about that. I mean, it's a 4-letter title, one word. It's like very much trying to go for the cheapest common denominator.
I honestly think the worst title I can think of that time is, well, of course, there was The Manster, which is another level of bad. But there was that one. It was It, The Terror from Beyond Space.
Yes.
It's like, no. But then you have ones that are as basic as Invaders from Mars.
You could even take that and call it like It Came from the Beyond or something, and just change it a little bit.
No, actually, I think that's literally a movie. I'm not making it up. Yeah,
well,
but and then also you had all the Beasts from 20,000 Fathoms. One of my favorite ones is The Valley of Gwangi, which is about dinosaurs and cowboys or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you had all those weird kind of titles of this time, but this one, it feels like it's a parody of itself. It's like, you know, but the movie actually, like I said, I remember being.
I feel like sometimes that sets in with certain movies of this time period. Is that I feel like people who haven't even seen some of these movies know what the stereotypes of them are, and they feel like they're watching a parody of them when in reality that's what they are. I don't know how much you want to talk about. We recently just rewatched Matinee.
Yeah,
which
it's similar,
is a really good little Joe Dante movie made in the early 90s, which is aping this a little bit. Also William Castle.
The Fly.
The Fly, a little bit of Hitchcock to an extent.
The Wasp
in terms of John Goodman plays a director who, again, is like more William Castle than anything, but there's a little bit of the Hitchcock persona that's thrown in there too, who is making this movie called Mant, half man, half ant, killer,
very
sci-fi horror movie that is within the backdrop of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so I was thinking a little bit about these movies while we were watching that.
Yeah.
But
this one is one of those movies that I've seen so many of these types of movies, and especially independent horror movies of the 50s is something I randomly have seen way too many of. This is one of the better ones. Now, of course, this is made by Warner Brothers, so it's going to be better.
Was it made by them at the time, or was that?
I think so.
Did they acquire it later?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they made it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was made by a big studio. It has the cachet and the money behind it. There's also this great. The opening of the movie is like them finding this little girl in this like totally wrecked town, and you can hear the sound of the ants really loud, but you don't see them. So that randomly, and I think I had seen Aliens around this time for the first time because I had seen Prometheus, so all that's kind of connected in my head. It reminds me of that, about the little girl in Aliens, and so But anyway.
Would you agree, out of like a lot of these sci-fi movies, that I feel like most people would say this, and I would agree that The Day the Earth Stood Still, and in the 50s and the 70s one's great too, but Invasion of the Body Snatchers are kind of the gold standards for this kind of genre. Those
also are more cerebral, especially something like Invasion of the Body Snatchers is so much about fearing. It's like a metaphor, a very more direct metaphor, whereas this is like, or a more complex metaphor, I should say. This is a lot more direct and just like atomic testing causes this, whereas that's like you can't trust people that you know. And so that was more complex. Also, that movie has Sam Peckinpah in it, which nobody ever remembers. And it's like, that's Sam Peckinpah. Why is he in this?
Right.
Kind of a villainous role in that too. You'll have to remember. No, but and then you start to see remakes of all these movies in the 70s and 80s. Of course, The Blob is another version
of this. That's a good one.
That's
the
great.
Steve McQueen one. Yeah.
The 80s Blob actually is pretty good too. I just watched that.
Right.
I sent you footage of that, and you were like, wow.
Yeah.
That movie is one of the glorious things ever. Anyway, this actually is in memory really pretty good, so I'm looking forward to
I've wanted to see that. I think that definitely typifies the whole giant insect tarantula, along with the tarantula.
Tarantula. That movie's okay. Yeah. It's kind of whatever, but this one's better, I remember.
And you said, so like DVDs and Blu-rays of this are really
now they
hard.
would be cheaper. That's what's funny. But I still live in the mind space of like 15 years ago when this movie was like so expensive to buy, and now it's like, you can get a DVD for like $2, and I'm like,
I feel like this for a long time was one of the earliest Netflix streaming movies that I remember always seeing, and I never did watch. And I
think that might have been how I saw it, either on there or on the Netflix DVD. And I feel like it used to always have them with an exclamation point on it too.
Yeah, I feel like I did remember that.
We've spoken way too long about them, so anyway.
I was going to do this movie later, but I think it would actually be a good follow-up to what we were just talking about. Is Forbidden Planet. This was from 1956.
Also a Warner Brothers film.
Also a Warner Brothers movie. I think this was MGM at the time, and again, it's since been repurposed, I think. Yeah.
We've talked actually random amount about this on our podcast here and there, Forbidden Planet, because we were talking about THX 1138. Yes. We talked about it, but
this is I really love what I love about this. I've got a Blu-ray of this, and honestly, I probably wouldn't even crack this open because this really is totally vacuum sealed, and plastic. I don't want to even really touch this. because like I said, I got a Blu-ray now anyways. I haven't seen this in a while, but I remember seeing this at the time, or not at the time, I wasn't alive then, but when I first saw this, and thinking, wow, this, because I always heard this was a huge influence on Star Wars and even 2001: A Space Odyssey. We'll be talking about Kubrick here in a little bit.
John Carpenter was a big fan of it.
And John Carpenter. Yeah. And I feel like this also just typifies like what we all remember 50s sci-fi movies to be, and as we said, not all of them are. And the reason I didn't even mention this earlier when I was talking about those other ones, as far as like Day the Earth Stood Still and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, is they ostensibly take place in our real world. Yeah. This is very much kind of like in a future place.
And this, we had said this too, this was important because you'd had so many movie serials do this kind of stuff, like Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers.
And this was done by MGM, which was the Tiffany of film studios in the 30s, really through the 50s and into maybe very early 60s. They were the gold standard.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too with them, with Warner Brothers, is that these were movies that were always usually restricted to serials that were being made by bigger studios. And so this was kind of the foot in the door that later on 2001: A Space Odyssey is going to blow wide open with MGM, and then after Star Wars, that's the standard now, is that these type of movies on a big scale are made by studios.
But to even get a movie like this made, it still had to be based on Shakespeare.
Yeah, so that's another thing too, is it's technically screenplays by Cyril Hume based on a story by Irving Block and Alan Adler, but it does have that like it's based on Shakespeare.
It's literally based on The Tempest. So.
And I think it is interesting too that like not necessarily the movie going public, but like a lot's been written about Star Wars after the fact that it was based off Joseph Campbell's writings about mythology, as if sometimes somewhere deep within us we need to have these validations of highbrow stuff making their way into these type of movies as a validation for their own existence. Just to read a little bit about this here. A dutiful robot named Robbie speaks 188 languages. An underground lair provides astonishing evidence of a populace 1 million years more advanced than Earthlings. There are many wonders on Altair 4, but none is greater or more deadly than the human mind.
Imagine yourself as one of the crew of this faster-than-light spaceship of the future, sharing their curiosity to know the unknown, their tension, their readiness for inconceivable adventures.
Sir, we're being radar scanned. United Planets Cruiser C-57D, J.J. Adams commanding. Who are you?
Morbius of the Bellerophon.
Oh, Dr. Morbius, my orders are to survey the situation on Altair 4.
Commander, if you set down on this planet, I warn you that I cannot be answerable for the safety of your ship or your crew.
When you reach the Forbidden Planet, you will meet Dr. Morbius, played by Walter Pidgeon. The Doctor is sole owner of this fabulous world. Anne Francis is his alluring daughter, Alta, who has never seen a young man till she meets Commander Adams, played by talented Leslie Nielsen.
Come on in.
Didn't bring my bathing suit.
What's a bathing suit?
Oh, murder.
You will meet a charming character in The Robot, able to produce, on order, 10 tons of lead or a slinky evening gown. Always at your service.
You must be the loveliest, softest thing you've ever made for me. And fit in all the right places. With lots and lots of star sapphires.
Star sapphires take a week to crystallize properly. Would diamond or emeralds do?
You explore all the wonders of a vanished civilization. You travel deep down into the heart of the Forbidden Planet to discover the incredible marvels of this lost genius race. These magnificent scenes in striking Eastman color stagger the imagination.
20 miles. Look down, gentlemen. Are you afraid? 7,800 level.
Yet the wonders of the planet Altair 4 conceal a strange and evil force, unknown, irresistible.
I think, too, one of the most, poetic things about this movie is that it's, in these really fabulous, creative environments.
Yeah.
But, there's not a lot of crowd scenes of the alien existence here. It's mostly this barren planet. I mean, we didn't mention Star Trek, that this is obviously going to be an influence on that for television.
It will later be a big influence, I think, on Mass Effect also, because the main aliens in this story, it's like they've come across one of their old temples, and you see the way it's built and made, but you never actually see what they look like.
A little bit of 2001: Space Odyssey in that, too.
Which is a lot like the Protheans in Mass Effect. And so, yeah.
So I just think this is a really, but we're talking about all these influences. It's just a very wickedly entertaining movie to watch, and
great
especially
theremin music, very colorful,
and memorably also has Leslie Nielsen as the lead. He, I think, is most memorably known as being part of the ZAZ production cycle with Airplane and the Naked Gun movies, and kind of
Secret.
Being this very
Secret,
and
Police
knowing in those movies to play it very straight, and that is part of the comedy. Well, that that whole archetype for him starts around this time when he was doing these pretty straight movies from the 50s. I know also that you know more about this world than I do, but the whole, I don't know, has Mystery Science Theater done a
not of this
commentary?
Because it's too good.
I was going to say
This Island Earth, which is kind of similar.
Yeah, that this is a movie that could easily be watched as a guilty pleasure by some people. I don't think that's fair to this movie. I think this movie is actually quite good.
Yeah.
Funny enough, though, it does say it lists starring Walter Pidgeon, Anne Francis, Leslie Nielsen, with Warren Stevens, and introducing Robbie the Robot.
Like he's real.
And then Robbie the Robot would later be used in all these other things.
Yeah, and Lost in Space and various versions of that. Yeah.
Interestingly, Kubrick, I'm going to talk about this later. I'm reading a biography of Kubrick right now. He was a big fan of this movie, actually. And he didn't like that some of the things were created for this movie were later used in other movies. So he saw to it that a lot of props and stuff that was created for 2001 was destroyed, because he didn't want any of that stuff to ever wind up in being in another MGM movie or whatever.
One of the famous scenes in this movie, too, is with Robbie the Robot, where it's that guy who's the cook on the ship or whatever, and he's a real man, I'm just a regular guy. I want to go see some baseball and have a brat, you know. Very 1950s man, and he says, I want you to make me some liquor or whatever, and he's like, how much do you want, or whatever, and literally makes him all this whiskey.
Yeah.
And that character was literally, I feel reused in the fake movie in Amazon Women on the Moon of the guy who's wearing the Mets hat, and he's got the monkey with him. It's there's a lot of random stuff like that in this movie.
They're cultural signifiers.
Right.
Just last words here about it. Featuring sets of extraordinary scale and first all-electronic musical soundscape in film history.
Yeah.
Forbidden Planet is in a movie orbit all its own. Again, I don't think this movie should be seen as a guilty pleasure of 50 sci-fi. I think that it is. I mean, it's really known as this big influence and harbinger of things to come, but I think in of itself is still a very quality
in the genre.
Movie.
I think in the genre film community, it's very respected. But,
yeah. So Forbidden Planet.
All right. So my next one is Summer of Sam, which we saw, of course, a Spike Lee film. We saw when I was in college a couple years ago.
Yeah, I've only seen it that one time.
I have too.
Loved it.
I love every Spike Lee movie that I've seen.
There's
so
some
far.
I like more than others, but he is who he is. He's one of our great directors.
But I feel like I really love him when he does stuff like this. Like,
it's a little left of center,
right?
Of exactly
it's
what
more,
you expect while fitting
right.
into his.
It's more Scorsese,
yes.
Who he's obviously a big fan of, knows and is a friend of, and is a big inspiration for him. But it reminds me a lot of that.
There was something in the air that night. The stars.
In one hot summer, in one neighborhood.
Is that Richie?
What's happening, guys?
You come back to the neighborhood looking like a freak? You're supposed to be okay with that?
Their world of lovers and friends would never be the same.
Police received a letter from the .44 caliber killer, calling himself the Son of Sam.
Vinny saw the dead bodies last night.
The Son of Sam killer, who has been targeting young women, has caused panic-stricken brunettes to dye their hair blonde.
I feel like I'm cheating on you with you.
I know who the killer is. Reggie Jackson.
What the matter with you?
What kind of guns did the killer use? 44 caliber, right? What's Reggie's number? 44.
Touchstone Home Video presents a Spike Lee joint. John Leguizamo, Adrian Brody, Mira Sorvino, Jennifer Esposito, and Ben Gazzara. In 1977, the summer belonged to Sam.
And is very different from something like Zodiac, which would be made, only really a few years later. Because this movie's actually not as old.
99?
Yeah, 99.
Part of the great series of films that came out in 1999.
Right. But what's so great about this, and I think what Spike Lee gives to this movie that others would not, is even somebody like Oliver Stone, who we talked about last time with Natural Born Killers, is to make it about the son of Sam and David Berkowitz, played, of course, by Anthony LaPaglia, who was in A Brother Where Art Thou?
Yeah. But memorably, the dog is voiced by John Turturro, who told him what to kill people. But
anyway, he makes it about that, but he also makes it so much about just the city of New York in 1977, and about kind of punk culture, about
a lot about also like the Puerto Rican,
right, like different
ethnicities
of New York City in 77. So it's just a really good snapshot of that era, which has been done in other ways. I mean, obviously The Deuce is a big version of that. Taxi Driver in its own way was a version of that. I'm sure he was very much inspired by that in the making of this. And it was also written by Victor Colicchio and Michael Imperioli and Spike Lee. So
Michael Imperioli's barely in it too. He's like
a reporter or something, isn't he?
I remember he's wearing like a cowboy hat, and he's working. I don't know if he's working in a porn theater or he's working in some place where some disreputable stuff's going on. Maybe even a brothel.
There's some
I can't
movie
remember
where he's a reporter in it, and I can't remember what that is.
Maybe it's this. I can't remember now which one of those it is.
Anyway,
it's a little
this
fuzzy.
movie
I need to
obviously
rewatch it.
has John Leguizamo and Mira Sorvino, and a lot of the movie is made up of them being like, "Are you cheating on me? Are you that's most of the movie, honestly." But and also Adrian Brody. But yeah, this is a really great movie. I've thought a lot about it since I saw it. And I think, do you have a Blu-ray of this?
No, I don't.
Okay, never mind. I thought that you did, but anyway, but I wanted to get this on VHS also just because it's a, it feels like a VHS movie of that time to me.
Of the 90s.
In kind of a similar way to Natural Born
I forgot how long
Killers.
this was. It's 142 minutes.
Yeah, it's a little long. But yeah, this felt like kind of a big kind of alternative swing for him because he had come off of obviously making movies like Do the Right Thing, Mo Better Blues, Malcolm X, Jungle Fever, He Got Game, Clockers. Well, was Clockers before or after this? I think it was after.
Might have been.
But yeah, so he started to make more like crime movies in kind of the late 90s, early 2000s with Clockers, Summer of Sam, even 25th Hour, kind of a version of that. And so, yeah, he kind of started to do things kind of different. The Inside Man also.
There's a lot of things to say about this movie. I think one random one is that John Leguizamo, who I'm going to mention here in a little bit with one of my movies, this is one of the few times he led a movie. Yeah, where he wasn't just a supporting actor in it. I mean, I think most memorably of him in Romeo plus Juliet. He was this really red hot character actor. He's also
he was really memorable in Collateral Damage, which is a terrible movie. But I remember him.
He is a hilarious person.
Oh,
he does a lot of really funny stand up. You should look up some stuff of him talking about Steven Seagal.
And he's very real too. He's a very authentic person, and very pretty much everything he says, I'm like, that sounds good to me.
Right.
But he's very funny. And so that's what I remember about this movie. He is really good in it.
Yeah.
But also the whole time I'm like, you're cheating on me. No, I'm not. And that's a lot like Mo Better Blues too. In retrospect, is a lot of that movie is about.
I would imagine, like you said, he probably saw a movie like this as an important piece of his filmography, and I've heard him say versions of this before where he wanted to prove, because the rap on him is, you only make movies about Black Americans or African American community.
There's a problem with that.
But, there's not. Yeah. But it was a chance for him to show, I can do stuff like this.
Yeah, because there aren't really a lot of African American characters in this movie in memory.
No, and also, I think, and it's arguable how much is in the movie, but all this stuff with Adrian Brody's character and his queerness is very... what I remember it to be pretty empathetic and pretty interested in that character and his relationship to this world, and how he's become an outsider with his punkness being the foreground to it, but really deep down in the background, it's his queerness is associated with that. So kind
of reminds me also, Carlito's Way had come out around that time, and that's kind of similar, and it's about Puerto Rican culture in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And so those would actually make a good double feature.
I think
that's actually a pretty good Brian De Palma movie too. So
I think too, as far as the serial killer aspect of this movie, I like what you said, that it's kind of using literally the Summer of Sam as a backdrop for this other story and series of stories, because the blackouts in this a little bit too that happened in 1977. It's not just purely a serial killer movie in the way that, I think it's a terrific movie, but something like Zodiac, it's still interested in not exactly the serial killer, the obsessive people who were going after the serial killers. And I like that this is that's a thing that's going on, and adds this culture of violence to the background that only is it kind of bumps up against all the other story stuff that really the movie's more interested in.
Right, so. And also, the summer of 1977 also, I think in a lot of ways, might have been the summer where everything felt like it was going to fall apart in America, because you had that going on, you had the blackout, Elvis died. I know that sounds kind of like a joke, but for a certain
all the other
generation
craziness of the
people,
70s that was going on. Jimmy Carter was president then, but we're still dealing with the after effects of Watergate and Vietnam and just cultural
and also
insanity.
Even Star Wars came out that summer, so it just felt like there was so many different things going on. It felt like, and this movie I think is really good at portraying that sense of literally we're on the brink of collapse, as a society that thankfully we got past. And because have you ever heard, by the way, maybe this is time to talk about this, have you ever heard about the way that a lot of people of that time period talk about New York City, and how they wish it were like that and not as gentrified as it is
Fran
now?
Lebowitz, who I like a lot, she's talked a lot about that.
Thurston Moore.
And I've even heard some of them admit, well, maybe that's just because I was a certain age then, and we all naturally look back on certain eras of our life. So I have heard a little bit more of reflective kind of, maybe I'm being a little too nostalgic about that.
Yeah.
This would be a good thing to pair with Taxi Driver, which was actually made around this time, and is, I think, a lot, and one of the reasons that movie among many is so iconic, because it's of course a terrific movie, but also it just will always be this anthropological, this is what New York City was like at this exact moment in time. And this is obviously after the fact, but I really love this movie. I only expect to love it even more after seeing it some more.
But Thurston Moore also, going back to that thing about the gentrification, it said some things about that. Also, I think I read that Lizzie Goodman book about Cat Power, Sean Marshall, and I think she talked similarly about New York of the time, kind of in the 80s, right after it had, or right when it was kind of starting to be that, and Ed Koch had kind of was mayor and was kind of trying to change. And a lot of, obviously The Deuce is about that, about and that's so genius about, like, not exactly saying that everything was great or, like, we should go back to that time, but it was, like, the ending of that show.
But there are undeniable flavors that will never, that are forever lost to time.
Right, and that people that, like I said, it plays the Blondie song Streets of New York and has all the ghosts of the characters in the show. And you can also think about, there's that great song, Halloween Parade by Lou Reed. We were just talking about this the other day because we listened to it in the car. And that's about, like, after AIDS, all the queer people of New York who had died. And it's, like, kind of about the ghosts of those people they're not around anymore. Yeah. And so there's a lot of lionization about this time period of New York City because it was falling apart, but it also felt, and also notably, the media's perception of that was also shown through this more freedom of ethnicity and sexuality, which is a good thing now, but they saw as part of that. But also, if you go back and watch it, like, literally, this is literally falling apart, and this is a crap hole, and it's awful. But I think that's a good way to think about memory of places is tied to people's own ideas of it rather than what it literally
who they
was.
were at the time.
And to say, oh, it used to be like, you could go down the street and everybody used to hang out at this spot, and it was so artistically buoyant, and all these great things are going on. And it's like, yeah, but also, like, people are literally starving. There was trash everywhere. Poverty was worse, and
obviously they just couldn't be controlled. But by the way, there's a serial killer running around.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, it feels like a weird time. This movie does a good job of it, of saying, remember when this was, but, like, the whole actual experience of living in it was so hellish. But you get the sense that the characters are almost themselves looking back on the time and saying, yeah, but there was something about that city.
I can't remember. Is there narration in this, or, like, any kind of
I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'd really love to rewatch this.
Yeah, it's good.
So. You got a John Leguizamo. Spawn from
who's he playing that? That, like, devil?
That clown freak.
So doesn't look
devil
like him.
thing.
Yeah.
We recently on the podcast did The Crow. This is one of the reasons I picked this, which I think for a lot of people typifies, as we talked about there, this, like, kind of the 90s superhero / pulp hero / gothic hero genre that was really kind of an after effect of the success of Batman in the late 80s and the early 90s with the Batman movies. And those, I think everybody knew that those were, like, the top of the line big studio movies. But then you had The Spirit, you had Darkman, you had, of course, The Crow, which is among the most iconic and remembered of those time periods. And then you have Spawn. Now, what's interesting is a lot of those characters existed years and decades before. Spawn is a quintessentially 90s creation in the comics itself, created, of course, by Todd McFarlane. So this is interestingly, like, among the quickest, like, hey, we have a new comic book character and a whole new line of stuff. Let's just kind of immediately turn it into a series of movies as opposed to IP that has existed for decades. I mean, by the time Batman 89 came out, of course, the prevailing memory of that was the 60s show. And so for a lot of people, it was this pseudo shock of, oh, you're going to take that but do it darker, when all along, of course, the history had existed for that. But anyways, this is an interesting example of, like, let's literally take something that just was created and adapt it. Imagine a creature on the verge of creation. A creature who must come out of the dark and into the light to fight for justice and vengeance, from flesh to steel, from blood to blade, from man to Spawn. Todd McFarlane's comic book sensation comes to life in this live-action film directed by Mark DePay, I'm not sure how you say that, which is, no offense to him, not a huge director from this time, which explodes with thrills, action, and stunning special effects. John Leguizamo and William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, An Executive Decision, where he talks about when he talked about Seagal working with him on that. Where that experience come from.
Oh, was that movie with Kurt Russell in it? Because you've seen that, right?
Yes, and it's not as good as the trailer
ever. And I never did see the full movie. You said, it ain't as good, and I was like, okay, but.
Michael J. White from Tyson and On Daily Ground, which he is the lead of the movie, Michael J. White, who, if you're like us, when you hear Michael J. White, you think of Black Dynamite, which is a great send-up of blaxploitation movies.
The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight is definitely the thing most people will have seen him in. And Martin Sheen. You want to guess the two movies that they credit Martin Sheen as being in here?
Were they more recent to that time period?
Yes.
Actually, don't know.
This would have been would have even been pre-West Wing too, as far as TV goes.
Because I was thinking like
the American President
and
Gettysburg, which he plays Robert.
Wait,
E. Lee,
he's in the American President. I thought Michael Douglas is in that.
He is also in that.
What?
Like, yeah, he's like, okay, because they're two actors that are oftentimes like
mixed up, and then it's like they're actually in the same movie.
No, but he is actually also in that.
Yeah.
Of those, American President and Dave's actually better, but that's a whole conversation for another day. Star in a battle beyond good, beyond evil, and beyond imagination.
It's time. Imagine a substance with the power to destroy humanity. Imagine a creature insane enough to use it. Imagine a hero on the verge of creation. From flesh to steel.
You must visualize your objective.
From blood to blade.
Don't get cocky. You have a lot more to learn.
From man to spawn.
Peekaboo. I see you.
We have harvested the ultimate weapon. Makes the Ebola virus look like a skin rash.
Congratulations. I say destroy the cosmos, ask questions later.
Who are you?
This is just what they want. You're playing their game.
Then I'll play dirty.
You've been violated, girly man.
You should armor!
Now stay sharp. The night is young.
This summer, evil has a new enemy. Justice has a new weapon. And the world has a new hero. Spawn.
So this is
beyond
also
imagination. How can we even see it? That's what I want to know.
So another thing with these types of superhero movies too, that they are like they're good, but they're like they're skirting the law and they're going to brood a little bit. Even Batman plays
Judge
into
Dredd,
that. Like Judge Dredd's also
betrayed
the law.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too. This is the special effects movie of the year, so you know why you're coming to this. It's for special effects. Born in Darkness, Sworn to Justice.
It was also, like I don't remember when the Punisher first became a thing. Was that in the 80s or early 90s?
I think the late 70s.
Oh, it was early.
I think
okay.
even,
but obviously the Punisher
the 80s,
was such a big thing in the 80s and 90s too.
There was that. I think it was Dolph Lundgren. Wasn't there like a Punisher movie he was in
so.
Before they made the one Thomas Jane was in the 2000s?
But yeah, so that's kind of, I think of that when I think of this too.
Yes.
Because these are especially about revenge. Also The Crow, but The Crow is independent, and like Image was technically independent when Spawn was, but Spawn's so big now we don't think of that as that, and it's like a bigger world, and it's like got a demonic aspect to it, and so it's different.
Have you seen this?
No.
I do I do, by the way, real quick. I like this better than the regular poster that they put out. And I remember this was also for me when I went to the video store in the 90s. I didn't see this till years later. But seeing the poster and the box art for this and kind of wanting to picking it up and looking at it, I was afraid of what I was going to see on the other side. And I saw it. So this was like a fascination for me as a child. About this looks kind of cool,
Hellboy
but
was also
scary.
kind of becoming a thing in the comics around that time too, and that's kind of similar. Now, that's tied to a different.
What are your general impressions or interest in Spawn, either as a character or even as this movie? Or in
in general, I'm interested. I always take at least. A lot of people are like, "Oh, whatever," but as a Christian, I always take some form of caution when I approach art like this. That's literally like there are demons and Satan is it, and I'm like, okay, let's be careful.
I think there's a whole mythology associated with heaven also in the world of this.
Yeah.
I'm not quite familiar with what it is, but
so I'm interested in it, but I just haven't ever got around to it. I think he looks really cool.
Yes.
As a creation. But one thing I'll say about this movie, the first time I ever saw any of it on TV, it was in Spanish.
Oh.
And it was Martin Sheen speaking Spanish.
Yes.
But then I started thinking, I was like, well, his father was Spanish, so it kind of links up. But obviously he wasn't actually speaking it. It was dubbed.
Yeah.
But that's something I've always thought so funny, I think back to, is like this really intense. And he's like, what was weird about this too is he like dresses up like in a leather jacket the whole movie. And he looks pretty much normal.
Yeah.
But he's just like Martin Sheen. But then he's like in a living room of somebody, and he's like speaking Spanish, and it's like, is this a Spawn movie? What is this? Like, it's just very strange version of that.
He's got like there's multiple modes to Martin Sheen. This is definitely in I'm the villain in the Dead Zone mode, Martin Sheen. If you remember him in that, how he's kind of preposterous and over the top. Like this is definitely like what he's playing to here.
He's that movie overall is fine, but he is really good in that. There's the scenes where he's like going so big, and he's like, I'm the president, I'll do whatever. Because it's so dumb. Literally, the final moment of the movie where he literally grabs somebody and puts in front of
There's
him.
Like a baby, ain't it? Like
it's a woman and a baby.
I think he does.
The book, I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you. I think the book is slightly better than that movie.
Stephen King novel,
that's also not one of Stephen King's best works either. So
I feel like anyway. I would imagine also at the time this was like, oh, this is Michael J. White's chance to be a big star, and he's obviously been successful, but not quite on a massive star-making level. In part because guess what? Like most of the movie is him when he's is just in this really deformed like makeup, and so it robs him of his naturally of his Michael J. Whiteness. But
it's only an hour and a half long.
93 minutes.
That's crazy. Wait, he played Mike Tyson in something? Because it says Tyson. I'm assuming that.
That must have been.
I didn't know that.
Might be some like HBO movie or something. I don't know. But Spawn.
Anyway, if you want to have some fun, go look up Triple H's impression of Mike Tyson from 1998. But anyway. All right, next one is this movie called Xanadu, which came out in the early 80s, I believe.
Let me just say, this was also one that I always walked by in the movie, the video rental stores and was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And I was very unsure about what it was. Was it like a sci-fi movie?
Yeah.
Like, I just didn't know.
So, like, I was actually not aware of this movie until last year, because some of the songs for it were on the...
This very famously had a big ELO soundtrack, right?
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
They have their logo right there on it.
But some of their songs were on the playlist for The Shards by Brett Easton Ellis when he put together a playlist of music that had been talked about in the movie, when I'm a big fan of, and I'd seen this poster. I was like, oh, I'd never heard of that, and I kind of looked into it, and I was like, of course a movie like that was made then. This comes in the era of that one movie, The Apple, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is like kind of a weird like psychedelic sci-fi-ish movie. Phantom of the Paradise, Rocky Horror Picture Show, even Hair. A lot of these like more musically inclined.
Even The Wiz, I guess, it's a musical.
Yeah,
Wizard
science
kind
fiction
of
or like
fantasy.
Yeah, fantasy musicals and these like big, and so
Flash Gordon, even
right?
Kind of slight version of that,
like the Queen soundtrack.
The Queen.
Yeah. Maybe even a Flash Gordon. I don't know.
Still never seen
but Xanadu is a look at the future and a loving remembrance of the way things were in the heyday of Hollywood. Okay. The musical score includes the hit songs Magic, I'm Alive, that song always all over the world, Suddenly, and the title song Xanadu. Olivia Newton-John, the strange newest love goddess, will dazzle your senses with her luminous bit. This was after Grease, luminous beauty, and she had been a musician around that time, obviously. But luminous beauty and beautiful voice. She and Gene Kelly star in this dazzling musical fantasy. The 40s meet the 80s in Xanadu, a very special love story about the first lavish, old-fashioned musical to utilize today's music. So yeah, it was made like a Gene Kelly.
I had no idea Gene Kelly was in this until I was looking on the back, and I was like, "Wait."
Well, this kind of reminds me also of like him being in this, and the way this look reminds me of Atlantic City, the Nicholas Roeg movie that has Burt Lancaster in it. Also, even a movie like My Favorite Year with Peter O'Toole.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So there were a lot of movies around this time that were taking these older actors and putting them in these like newer situations.
It is interesting too, the natural rhyming of Gene Kelly being involved with this, because of course his most iconic movies, Singing in the Rain, and that movie's of course made in the 50s, but then
about the 20s,
set in the 20s. We talked about that on the Babylon episode recently, and it's interesting that like it's in the 80s, and it's like kind of by virtue of when it was made, advertising its 80s-ness. But it's also saying, oh, that stuff that you used to like years ago in the 40s, now if a version of this was made today, it'd be trying to emulate the 80s, of course, you know. But I've always wanted to see this.
Yeah, and I had seen it at where we were buying some of these, and I was like, oh, I've heard of that recently. It almost looks like a Stephen King movie, like the way her hair and like, I know she's like going to be Firestarter or something.
It doesn't exactly look like Frank Frazetta art, but it looks like that era of like pop art or like paperback covers, like you're saying, that you just see and you're like, and you might not ever read that book or see that movie, but you always remember the image of it. And I figure that I do not know people who like this movie, but I would imagine there's some of that even with this.
Right.
So, Xanadu. Who directed that?
Robert Greenwald.
I've heard that.
It was produced by Joel Silver and Lawrence Gordon, who were a big producing partnership. But, yeah.
Good deal. Rated PG.
Yeah, if anybody's worried about that. But okay, so one other thing I want to mention. Songs for Olivia Newton-John by John Farrar. Songs by Electric Light Orchestra, or songs for Electric Light Orchestra by Jeff Lynne. Musical scoring by Barry Dvorzin.
Yeah.
So they can't figure out who's doing the music in this movie, but.
There was probably a lot of proprietary. I get credit for this.
Right. Bunch of a-holes, probably.
Jerry Maguire, of course. I don't know. I didn't grow up watching this a lot in the 90s. Obviously, I wasn't quite old enough. But when I think of, like, quintessentially 90s movies, for me, Jerry Maguire's, like, right there towards the top of the list. I think there's a lot of things you could say about Jerry Maguire. One of my favorite things about it, by the way, it came out in 1996. It got a lot of massive Oscar nominations. It was a big box office success.
The biggest thing for Cameron Crowe's career overall, by far,
yes.
I think, because he's made Almost Famous, had written Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Vanilla Sky. You know, he's done other things, but this is the one that really was big.
And I think this kind of synthesizes him at his best, because I'm a general fan of him.
Yeah.
When you see a movie like Aloha, which I actually am fascinated by, even though it's not all that good, and that's him not on his best day. A lot of, like, the earnestness and sincerity can come off, and I say that as somebody who generally likes a lot of that stuff, and that's why I like him a lot in general, can come off like it just doesn't feel like it's, because that's a very tricky thing to do well in movies. That's why it's so mocked oftentimes. This is it for me at the exact right level and temperature. This is also a very important movie for Tom Cruise, because I think this is and I wish Tom Cruise was doing more movies like this, because I like a lot of the modern action movies he's done, but
he's done enough of those.
But this to me is his quintessential role, because it plays into why some people don't like him. The character itself is one that's all about the outside. It's all about the smile. It's about the run. It's like about all those things, and how fake all that is. And actually, like, who are you going to be when you actually have to stand up and live by your convictions? Mm-hmm. This movie very interestingly starts, and I think what would be the third act of a lot of other movies, in terms of literally over the opening credits, he's already had a crisis of confidence. And you're like, when you first watch it, you're like, who is this guy? Why am I so...
And he's like, I wrote this manifesto about my life, and it's like, I don't even know who
literally,
you are.
Like, right as the opening credits end, is like him, I'm going to paraphrase what he says. He says something like, it was the first day of my life, or whatever. And it's about whether or not he's really going to live up to the convictions of what he just did. This movie's romantic comedy, first and foremost. It's a sports drama. It's a satire. If you're wanting to get your bang for your buck in terms
of randomly
just,
long too, isn't it?
It is like, quite long. Yeah. It's like 2.5-ish hours.
Yeah.
Well, 138 minutes, so it's like it's about 2 hours and 20 minutes.
But that's long for a romantic comedy.
Yeah. If you're just looking for movies that pack a lot in a single punch, this is a handful of movies I'd recommend, because I just really love this movie. I remember when I first saw it, would have been when I was in college, and just the economy of the screenplay to pack in as much as it does. Renee Zellweger's very good in it, as is, of course, Cruise himself. I wouldn't say it's underrated, because he won an Oscar and gave one of the most iconic Oscar speeches of all time. But Cuba Gooding Jr. in this movie, how much of the movie, while it's a romantic comedy, is actually about their relationship, him and Tom Cruise's
relationship.
relationship.
And about his wife a lot, too, in it. She's a character. And
normally
other movies wouldn't do that.
Played by that actress we really love. I can't remember her name. She's the lead in Watchmen, the show. Regina King. Regina King's really good in this.
Yeah, that's who that was.
And even, like, I can't remember his name, but like this character's brother is like randomly in a lot of it. I think that guy was later on Mad TV. I can't remember the actor's name. About he's just always getting in his business or whatever. He's in the Show Me the Money scene. Right. I think there's
so many lines from this movie too that immediately entered the pop culture.
You complete me. Shut up. You had me at hello. Right. This is also kind of a secret Christmas movie. Yeah. This movie's about concussions and the problems that has in the NFL in 1996. This would not be made today.
What I was going to say is that it's one of the last big movies the NFL ever sponsored and said, "This is our movie. Or this is an NFL movie."
Jerry O'Connell, Kushlash.
Yeah.
His father's Bo Bridges. Yeah. Just like
one of my favorite scenes, and I've seen this movie twice, maybe. I've
been trying to get all of us, me, him, and our parents, to watch it for Christmas around that time, sometime, because it's not exactly a Christmas movie, but just it's also going on during the NFL season, and it's a sports movie, right. And
but there's that one scene in it where and then there's we haven't even talked about little boy in it, who's
Jonathan
Lipnicki character, right? who's really good.
My Little Vampire, I watched that as a kid's movie a lot growing
But there's
up.
that scene, and I'm not going to quote it exactly because it's a curse word, but one of my favorite lines in any movie.
Yeah.
He's sit, and it's like he's going through.
He's waiting on Renee Zellweger to get ready,
right?
And he's sitting in the living room with
this
Nicky's
major crisis.
Yeah,
and he's like, "Let's go to the zoo," and he looks at him and he says, "Ray."
He's almost doing a Nicholson
impression. Like, effing zoo's closed. Yeah. Like, and he just says this to a child. I think you used to talk about this too, but. I think, and also the ending of the movie. I love, like I said, how
all-time soundtrack.
Yeah,
also.
And that obviously comes from,
of course, Cameron Crowe.
There's multiple movies or multiple moments in this movie that I really love. One that you used to talk about a lot is he's driving and he's going through the radio and he's trying to sing to all the songs.
And he realizes he's like, there are all these modern, popish songs, and he has no relationship to any of them, and doesn't even understand.
And then he puts on "Free Fallin'" by Tom Petty, and he sings every word exact, and it's like literally he himself.
Yes,
it's stupid to literally say, but is in free fall. Or also even the ending using "Shelter from the Storm." That's a just awesome moment to
There's
end on.
There's some Springsteen in this. There's The Who. I mean,
I think what's so great though about the climactic scene, and a lot of people joke about it and make fun of it now. But of the "You Complete Me" scene is literally him coming in the middle of a woman's book club.
Yes, because usually when you see this scene, it's the reverse shot of them two. But yeah, there's all these other women that are sitting there.
And that's just such a, I think, organic, random scene to put that in the middle of. So yeah, it's really a perfect movie in a lot of ways. It's not even maybe a 5-star movie, but it's
I would be inclined to say that maybe it is because And again, I wish they made more movies like this. And again, the weird NFL-ness of it means that it won't be because it's but I also just really wish Cruise was doing more stuff like this. Again, I love the modern action stuff, but this is perfect for even people that don't like Cruise because it's about getting under the layers of fakeness. And I say this as a fan of him and getting to what a great actor he actually can be and is. Can't say enough good things about Jerry Maguire. Deeply love Jerry.
We want more from them, so let's give them more. Let's show them your pure joy of the game. Let's bury the attitude a little bit and show them...
Wait. You're telling me to dance?
No. I'm saying to get back to the guy who first started playing this game. Remember? Way back when you were a kid? It wasn't just about the money, was it? Was it? Was it?
Do your job. Don't you tell me to dance.
Fine. Hey! Fine!
I am an athlete. I am not an entertainer.
Fine!
These are the ABCs of me, baby. I do not dance, and I do not start preseason without a contract.
Fine!
Jerry, talk to me. Breathe. Breathe, Jerry.
I am out here for you. You don't know what it's like to be me out here for you. It is an up at dawn, pride-swallowing siege that I will never fully tell you about, okay? Just, God, help me. Help me, Rod. Help me. Help you. Help me. Help you. Help me. Help you.
You are hanging on by a very thin thread. And I dig that about you. No contract, help me. I help everybody. That's my man.
Hey, I'm happy to entertain you.
Help me.
All right, our last selection.
My last one is a double tape. So don't do a double tape.
Yeah.
Is Once Upon a Time in America.
This is beautiful. This how it's shrink wrapped, and
I've been really close, by the way, to buying a shrink wrap version, VHS version of 1900 by Bernardo Bertolucci. A lot of you are like, "What?"
Yeah, I've always wanted to see that,
but I haven't done that yet. I got this, though. We talked about this movie a lot on the podcast. I wrote a really long review for this movie back when we saw it. This is a movie we had been kind of chasing around the block
Sergio
for
Leone,
many years.
of course, directed.
Sergio Leone's gangster movie. I want to talk a little bit about Sergio Leone because Sergio Leone has made some of the greatest films ever made.
The whole Dollars trilogy, of course, first and foremost, I think we think about Good and Bad, the Ugly. Yeah. Arguably one of the top 5 greatest films of all time.
And even For a Few Dollars More is so great.
And then, of course, the first one's good, too.
But then
Fistful of Dollars.
He would go on to make a movie like Once Upon a Time in the West, which we went and rewatched during COVID. And I was really let down by that movie because I feel like...
That's one of the most flawed movies that has as much greatness in it as it does.
I mean, because we've talked about it before, probably at some point.
The opening is... one of the great openings.
The first probably
movies.
20 minutes or half hour.
Henry Fonda is also really great in it.
Has a lot of great actors in it. Claudia Cardinale's really good in it.
Charles Bronson.
Jason Robards is awesome.
Yeah, Robards great. Bronson. I think
Henry Fonda's great.
Would you agree that the movie has some other problems, but if it had someone other than Charles Bronson as the lead, that would have... it's kind of trying to do the Eastwood character, but
Charles Bronson also, he was part of so many of those, like, Great Escape, Dirty Dozen movies that it's 60s, like Donald Pleasance was in a lot of those too, but he was also great.
We love Donald Pleasance.
So that movie, rewatching it, I was not very impressed by. The score is genuinely bad. I also don't.
There's probably some people that would chafe at that. I don't know if I would go quite that far, but I don't. It's not on the level of the other Morricone.
And Morricone, Ennio Morricone is somebody else who also he coincidentally has made the single greatest score of all time with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And is also one of, I think, I'm not even being hyperbolic, one of the worst scoresmen I've ever heard.
We talked about this a lot on the Untouchables podcast.
His music is so overdramatic, so operatic, so bad.
I'm not trying to be insensitive. That's I guess the Italian operatic tradition is what he comes from. I guess
I just hate it so much. So many of his scores are so terrible, and he would reuse his own scores. Mm-hmm. Very lazy. Anyway, sorry, I'm not here to talk bad about Ennio Morricone, who also did the music for this.
Score of that, right?
And then we saw this movie back about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I had seen some of this movie years before. It's notoriously long.
How long is this version? 226 minutes.
Is the longest version of the movie.
Is that the version that we have the Blu-ray of? We watched?
Because there was the shorter version, which a lot of people say is awful.
We never saw that.
And this was, of course, made. It came out in I think 84. I'm pretty sure 83.
Okay.
It had come out right after Heaven's Gate. Here we are talking about Heaven's Gate again.
We find a way to somehow bring it up.
And so there was a lot of reticence to give this movie
this kind of thing again.
And it's a lot like Heaven's Gate in a lot of ways. It reminds me of that.
Yeah.
But that it got a really short version, and then there was this famed longer version that finally came out, probably with this or a little later, that was longer. And I haven't seen the shorter version. I don't think this does it a whole lot of favors, the longer version either. Our ultimate rating on this movie is probably a 3.5 or 4 out of 5. Yeah. It's good. It's perfectly fine. I think there are sections that are amazing.
Yeah.
I really love the opening. Treat Williams is randomly really good in it. But I don't know. There's just something about this movie that doesn't thrill me particularly, and I don't really know what it is. I think part of it is James Woods, who is in the movie, quite a bit of the movie. I'm not really a big fan of James Woods, other than all his madness, anyway.
Mm-hmm. We were just talking about this in private conversation recently, that he's actually really great in the Virgin Suicides, the Sofia Coppola movie.
Yes, and he's also really good in Casino. I feel like he's great as a character actor.
Well, and also even as the voice of Hades in Hercules, he's pretty good as a villain.
But when he leads a movie more like, and he's not the lead of this movie, but when he's in it a lot, and also a movie like Videodrome, which you're more of a fan of than me.
That kind of, a lot of his best stuff, dovetails into his sleaziness in some regard.
So
I would say Virgin Suicide's a little different.
This movie's trying to make him something.
Mm-hmm.
And be like, oh, he's kind of sympathetic and trying to do that. And so that's a lot of word salad to get to basically say, this movie's fine.
I will say, like, one of the more unexpected things for me is how much it focuses on Jewish American gangsters. Because obviously Leone's...
because he's Italian.
Yes, so I was going to say, you would think he would want to maybe go a route about doing that.
And also, it's coming off of it's a movie that, like, nobody really asked for or wanted because it reminds me a lot of the prequel sections of The Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, too, is that it's just... you're gonna have to work very, very, very,
because you already
very, very hard to not be on that level.
Leading that again, and it's like, because I'm a big fan of the early 1900s massive epic crime western type of thing, like something like this, but I don't think it's as great as this. You know, Heaven's Gate, Godfather Part 2. Like, I love movies like that. That's like if I could watch a certain type of movie all the time. It's a long, really big production of like a urban or otherwise, you know, late 19th century, early 20th century saga. I just love that. That's literally what I want from movies all the time. And this is not one of the great ones, I don't think, because one thing I do like about this, though, too, is that it takes the teens, 20s, and 30s, and then has, like, the old guys in the 70s.
Yes.
Being, like, looking back on that. And so that is an interesting kind of... I've been watching a lot of stuff and thinking a lot about Henry Miller, a guy whose books I haven't even read.
Mm-hmm.
But that's his kind of time period is, like, from the teens and 20s as, like, a man growing up to the 70s. And I feel like that's randomly... A lot of people call that the lost generation, but I feel like that's a very particular generation to age into the 20th century.
Yeah.
To have been of age in a time where a lot of other more famous people were just being born.
Yeah.
And so they kind of come at this weird time period that I'm fascinated by that. And this is a lot about that. But the movie's too long. It's a little too over-dramatic in certain ways. Very operatic, obviously. But I don't think it's also one of De Niro's best performances. There's a lot
we haven't mentioned it. A movie this reminds me a lot of is The Deer Hunter.
Yes.
The Michael Cimino movie where De Niro's in also. Now, that's about the Vietnam War, but it is about these kind of immigrant communities in a similar way, I think.
Right.
And it kind of looking back a little bit on that.
And I feel like the movie is...
That's more contemporary, obviously, than this is.
The movie is at its greatest in this image. Because
I remember when we were watching it, it was like, that's the moment. That's the
but like
moment.
Genuinely, I think that is a truly...
The sense of scale in this, obviously, in that image.
That's the scene where, spoiler, that little kid that's in front of them gets shot and killed, and he's the one kid who doesn't age with the rest. And there's kind of this haunting quality to the movie about that child's death, killed by, like, ostensibly an adult man, or like people that are older, just like murdered in the street. And like... That's what I'm saying. There's so much about this movie. There's like all these great parts to it, but it just doesn't come together. And for a fact, I have heard Joe Dante and Josh Olson, who do the Movies That Made Me podcast, talk about this movie before. And they have said that they still don't feel that it's the version that it should be. And I know that, I think Joe Dante said if he could, because he's an editor, you know, originally, he said if he could ever get a movie in the editing room, just one, and mess around with it, it'd be this. He says he feel like there's something that can be done with it.
It does, in general, even the visual of this VHS tape typifies this movie as almost a big, fat block of granite that was never exactly made into David.
Right.
That it was advertised to be, you know.
Not even something like Heaven's Gate came to us as already that fully formed version of itself that was just kind of...
I think another thing, too, when thinking about it in comparison to Heaven's Gate just feels like it has so much life.
Yes.
And which adds to the tragedy of the movie by its end. What these lives and these communities. This, maybe I'd feel different if I rewatched it. I feel like it's kind of... going through the motions, which in some ways is a model of the De Niro character's remembrance of this time period. I mean, because I love De Niro. He loves to underplay things. This is one of his most underplayed performances from like this era of his career.
And there's the character played by Deborah that he literally rapes in a scene in the movie, and
that's something that's pretty infamous about it.
And it's like, like I said, there's just so many ideas this is playing with that don't work.
Yeah.
Do you remember also James Woods' final scene in the movie? Where he literally is walking behind a trash truck and jumps into the trash truck and disappears. And it's literally like... Yeah.
He's never been the same since.
Right, well. But, yeah, you're right about that, though. I think that that movie, Heaven's Gate, is so much about
and it
ethnicity
still has,
in a different way than this is.
And
like, this is about ethnicity, but it doesn't
Heaven's
feel
Gate
like
is
it
told
is as
in
much.
chronological order.
Yeah.
But there is a naturally, like... looking back on it, maybe that's after you rewatch it, especially you're thinking about the sum total of it all. But I don't know. I just think that movie obviously has been reclaimed, and I think a lot of people want to try to lift this up on a similar level. And part of me wants to, but it's just not. Yeah, it doesn't have the juice. So to speak.
And also this movie, I feel like later Boardwalk Empire would traffic in the same ideas. And be a way better version of.
Yeah.
And so...
That's TV, obviously. But yeah.
So that's something I think of when I think of that. So it's interesting. I picked this just because it's like the way it is. It's in perfect condition. This is one I also don't know if I'll ever open.
I mean, that's all... I mean, but, I don't think I'm being dramatic when I say this. This, literally, as you see this VHS now, shrink wrapped the way it is, in perfect condition, is almost an art piece that is representative of what this movie is.
Right.
Because it's... Again, it's something that we all want to be better, but just.
But then, like I said, you also know of all the other movies at that time that were that great, and it's like we don't really need this movie. That sounds weird to say about a movie, but like I said that at the time. I think I called it the epic of nobody's time. Like it feels like a movie that is about people in the '70s looking back on the Prohibition and Depression, and it's like that was an era that had totally passed by.
Do you think?
And
maybe the last words about this with this. There are certainly Sergio Leone movies we've yet to see and we'd like to see.
I still haven't seen Fistful of Dynamite, which
that's good. I like that. Do you think there's something about him approaching formalism that is a little stale or doesn't quite work? Because obviously Once Upon a Time in the West is a much more formalistic movie than the Dollars movies are.
Yeah, because I think that was what was so great about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is him taking the same style, more or less. I think he learned, like, obviously from A Fistful of Dollars to that is like a more refined style.
Well, it's also all of them are on a bigger scale, too.
So that movie is on a bigger scale, but it still feels like it's a little good. It's operatic, but it's still like, but let's kind of have some fun. Yeah. And
there's nothing in any of, honestly, of those movies of his I've seen exactly that approaches the performance of Eli Wallach in The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, which is as good as Eastwood are and as good as Lee Van Cleef is.
Probably better in for a few dollars more, but is still really great in that.
But Eli Wallach is what... that movie would already be great, but I think he takes it to another level even. So. And I do remember we like Trick Williams. Trick Williams whooped that trick in NXT Superstar. Treat Williams we do like a lot, and I do remember liking him in this.
There's a great scene where he gets gasoline poured on. That's another thing. I was watching some of this movie on cable here a while back. I was eating breakfast before I go to work. So I'm always like, what's on cable at 6:30 in the morning? And this was on, and it was the sequence where he was getting... That he's like the guy with
probably
all the
one of the more memorable
stuff
moments in the movie.
Yeah, and he's like getting gas poured on him, and he talks himself out of being murdered, literally. And I was like, this scene is so good.
Another random movie that we didn't mention around this time, The Cotton Club.
Oh, of course.
I really like that a lot.
That movie is better than this. I'm still not as crazy about it, but it is good.
And that also went through a movie that kind of got re-edited.
Well, and that's another movie where it's like, I like Richard Gere okay, but if it had a better lead than Richard Gere, I think the movie would also be better.
I don't exactly agree with that, but I definitely understand that impulse. I do quite like that, though.
Yeah. Anyway, talk a long time.
last but not least, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
It is funny to see that written on a VHS.
There's a lot to talk about with this movie. Even seeing this as a VHS, because I got given this as a gift from our good friend and cousin Philip Bryant, because he'd recently got into VHSs himself, and he grabbed some and he gave me this. And I don't really ever intend to watch this exactly on VHS because it's not necessarily looking like it's the best shape. But just the fact of having this is never a movie I imagined on VHS, even though of course it would have had to have been, because I primarily saw this on DVD and then eventually the Blu-ray that the Criterion put out that I have. This is my favorite Stanley Kubrick movie.
Yes, mine too, I think.
I do think 2001: A Space Odyssey is his greatest film. He's got, obviously, his...
Nothing tops the final line of Eyes Wide Shut, though, anyway, that movie is really great,
yeah,
by
it is
the way.
great.
But just
this is... Oh, it's interestingly, again, I'm going to talk about this book I'm reading about. It says Hawk Films. That was the name of his production company, kind of it's on the back here. A lot of his movies have comedic moments, but of course they're not comedies. He's almost sometimes mocked or made fun of for how seriously he sometimes takes his movies.
Which I think is why a lot of people really love Full Metal Jacket, is because the opening of that is trying to be funny, but also not be funny. It's kind of playing this very particular dance that it's going with, and I feel like that's why a lot of people love that movie, is because they're like, oh, this is so funny, and it's like, it is, but I also think that Kubrick is also saying, but it's also not funny.
Well, it's also the perversity of that juxtaposed against war, because there's not really hardly any comedy like something like Paths of Glory, which was, of course,
that's literally one of
serious.
The most unfunny films of all time.
And famously, the story behind this is that as he was developing this and turning it into an idea, he himself was quite terrified of the prospects of nuclear war, which was, of course, rife in the late 50s to the early 60s. He was thinking about even moving him and his wife and some of the children that he had born by that time to Australia, because he was so terrified that he was mostly living in England by this time, not totally, but that he was afraid, all of Europe and America is going to get nuked, so let me just go down there. This is a movie that also, I think one of the most famous things about it is the production design done by Ken Adams. Who did a lot of the Bond movies also at this time period.
It feels
I
like
think he just
Bond,
came after Dr.
The
No.
War Room feels like a Bond
set.
And
I think, too, the gravity of this image of, that combined with the absurdity of Peter Sellers' triple performance in this.
Nearly quadruple,
No movie's really perfect if you want to go through and talk about this little thing, that little thing. This is among the more perfect movies in my own opinion,
especially tonally. Because it's so complex about what it's trying to do, and it is very much a comedy the whole time. I mean, but it also is making you say, but also,
and also
bad,
the thin line between peace and war. I remember there's a lot of scenes that really stood out to me the first time I saw this. Probably the one that I most remember, though, as far as having oh wow, that's what we're dealing with, is the scene where Sterling Hayden gives his explanation as to
infiltration,
that whole thing about what this is all really about. It's all about
our precious bodily fluids.
It's that is what is leading to all this, and that sense of idiocy, that sense of hubris, that sense of just insanity being entrusted into a handful of people that can activate such a thing to happen. I remember when I first saw this being this is insane. This is so crazy. And also laughing of course,
one
throughout.
Of the great line readings is Peter Sellers as President Merkin Muffley, by the way.
Mm-hmm. It's almost playing like a Midwestern Truman-esque, very bland, intentionally president.
But there's that part where all this is explained to him, and he just very seriously, and it's nothing inherently funny about it, but it's just, I think because of how seriously he said it, he says, the man is obviously a psychotic. Honestly, one of the funniest line readings of the movie is that they're like, okay, so then how do we deal with this? And obviously the whole plan, in case you kind of explain this, I guess, but basically Sterling Hayden's character sends out a whole bombing raid on Russia, which would literally cause a nuclear annihilation, basically. and there's a code that only he really knows that they can even access to stop everybody from doing it. And so the movie follows the people in the war room, the people on Burleson Air Force Base where this is where all this is happening at, and then one plane heading towards its target.
Slim Pickens,
which Slim Pickens is in, and also James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
Also funny, he employed both people to play Darth Vader of that time.
Yeah.
Because he was also that David Prowse
in Clockwork Orange.
But that the whole thing is ultimately about we need to figure out a way to stop this from happening. And
that both sides actually want to avoid it.
Yeah.
But all it takes is several rogue figures within both apparatuses to
because one of the great characters in the movie is the Russian kind of go-between that they have there that they bring down that's in Washington that they bring to be there, and there's all this like comedy between him and George C. Scott's character about hating each other. They hate each other, but they are also, like I said, wanting to prevent it. Also love the phone call scenes between the president and the premier of Russia, and the premier is seen as this totally alcoholic, insane, crazy person, but it's all told over one line of phone. You don't even hear any of that. Yeah. But one of my other favorite line readings is, keep your feet on the ground when you're talking to me, Dimitri. Like, he's literally jumping up and down with the, just so funny. I mean, that's the thing is if you describe what the movie is, it's deadly serious. And, of course, Failsafe had come out around the same time. And that movie is also really good.
Kubrick even went out of his way to prevent that movie from coming out before this.
Right,
because he was
but is deathly serious.
And that was always a movie that I was like, oh, that won't be as good as Dr. Strangelove. It's not, but it is actually really, really great. A terrific ending.
That, especially. And I think that. And
I remember how shocked I was when we were watching that downstairs, and literally when it just goes to black at the end, and all the sound and everything that precedes it.
That and On the Beach have two of the best endings I've ever seen, and they're both very similar in what they are. And around the same time. So
and Sidney Lumet did that one. That's of course like a much more
Kramer
earnest, dramatic version of this, and it's all really good. This is one of the best movies of the decade. Of the 60s, best movies of all time, one of the best comedies ever. I mean, it goes on and on. And so I just don't have enough good things to say about it. Again, what's your favorite of the Peter Sellers performances? So just real quick, he of course plays the president. He plays Dr. Strangelove, the titular character himself. And then he also plays
Captain Lionel Mandrake.
The RAF
Captain Lionel Mandrake.
Colonel. Which is like him doing his most naturalish accent.
I feel like my favorite one probably actually might be the president. I feel like I laugh at that one the most because it's played the most serious out of all of them, and that's funnier. Dr. Strangelove is almost like a non-character to me. I mean, he's funny, but he's only in a couple scenes.
And the whole comedy with that character is that he's this former Nazi who is like struggling to keep in like all of his Nazism, and there's these moments he just can't help it. And he's like trying to like stop himself.
Yeah, one of the famous images of his own hands strangling himself.
Oh, he's about to do the salute.
I really love. I think that performance in that. Also, I really love.
He was going to also be the Slim Pickens part, but didn't have enough time to learn the accent.
I also really love, and I can't remember the actor's name right now, something Arkin. He was in Nashville, and he was in Point Blank.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, he's in that one scene as Sergeant Bat Guano. But he is so funny in this, where he's literally like talking about, kept saying you're a prevert or whatever, and you have all these perversions, and like that he's like. There's that great moment. It's in the trailer where he's spoiler. Somebody kills themselves, and he's like, he shot himself in the bathroom or whatever. And he's like, "Where's the bathroom?" And he like goes over and looks, and he's like,
"Wasn't your profile pic at some point
for a
years ago on Facebook
was
him?"
And then another great scene is when they literally need just enough change to call the president on the phone.
Yeah.
And he's out of change, and he looks to Bat Guano, Lionel Mandrake, and is like, "Have change?" He's like, "You think I go into a war zone with change in my pocket or whatever?" And he's like, or go into combat with change in my pocket, and he's like, "Shoot the lock off of that Coca-Cola machine over there to get the money out." And he's like, "It's private property." He's like, "If you don't do this, I'm not going to get the president on the phone." And he's like, if you don't get the president on that phone, you know what's going to happen? He's like, what? He's like, you're going to have to answer the Coca-Cola company.
That combined with certain scenes in the war room are about the absurdity of, like, in these situations where the world will very well may end, we still got to keep some decorum. One of the most famous lines, of course, is, gentlemen, this is the war room. There's no fighting in the war room, you know, like, and that like satire of trying to prevent this awful thing from happening literally means the end of civilization, or like, but we gotta have some rules to, that whole, you know, divide is a, you know, very cleanly the key to the comedy of this movie, I feel like. I was going to mention, I'm currently reading a biography of Stanley Kubrick that recently came out called Kubrick and Odyssey by Robert Kolker and Nathan Abrams, and it's kind of an overview of his whole life and career. I'm currently in the section that's kind of post-Shining leading up to Full Metal Jacket.
Like I joked earlier, I said, oh, did you just finish the Barry Lyndon section where he's, oh my God, he's just so genius, but he's so bored.
That was talking a lot about, they shot that movie mostly in Ireland, and then the IRA like made some threats against him and his family's life, so they had to leave and finish the movie in England.
Okay. I didn't know that. Why did that? Why? Because it was an English movie.
Well, that was
about an Irish character who was being English or whatever. Right.
And that was right when a lot of IRA stuff was going on in the 70s.
Got Mountbatten, as they said. In the TV
but anyways,
show.
this is a really, really terrific biography. I will say, like, I mean, it's going over a lot of little stuff I didn't know. It loosely confirms a lot of the wider mythology about Stanley Kubrick, while also talking about, well, maybe this is both good and bad about him. Like, maybe that this is not true or is incomplete or whatnot. But anyways, it's a really terrific book that, of course, makes me want to just rewatch all of his movies because he's one of the guys. I mean, he's one of the men. And I think 2001 is his greatest film. I think there's an argument to be, for me, my top three of his would be like this, The Shining, and 2001 as far as favorites. I think 2001 is his best film. But all three of those especially, and even the other stuff too, like you were mentioning earlier, Eyes Wide Shut, obviously one of his best movies. I will say one last little thing about this, unless you have anything to add.
No.
It says that this is classified as science fiction here on this, which it kind of is, but
so this tape has seen hell and back.
Yeah.
Look at the so like a disaster, literally.
Attack!
Russia. Oh.
Base.
10 females to each male.
The Coca-Cola machine.
Fluids.
The Doomsday Machine.
Blast off!
Where's my shorts?
Where's the bathroom?
Buck, should I get it?
On the hotline.
Dr. Strangelove.
Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and
Love the bomb. A moving picture.
I shouldn't tell you this, Mandrake, but you're a good officer and you have a right to know. It looks like we're in a shooting war.
Hell. All the Russians involved, sir?
Well, boys, I reckon this is it. Nuclear combat toe-to-toe with the Ruskies.
I don't like the look of this, Fred. I tell you what you better do, old buddy.
I was under the impression that I was the only one in authority to order the use of nuclear weapons.
That's right, sir. You are the only person authorized to do so. And although I hate to judge before all the facts are in, it's beginning to look like General Ripper exceeded his authority.
I first became aware of it, Mandrake, during the physical act of love.
Missile still deflecting. Range 1 mile.
Has that plane really got a chance of getting through?
Well, sir, if the pilot's good, see? I mean, if he's really sharp, he can barrel that baby in so low. I mean, you ought to see it sometime. It's a sight. A big plane like a 52. Vroom! It's jet exhaust frying chickens in the barnyard.
Dr. Strangelove.
Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and
Love the Bomb. A moving picture.
This is one of those movies that I remember seeing and my world wasn't radically changed, but just thinking, wow, you can make something about a topic that dense and serious and make it funny. That was something that was very groundbreaking
a movie
to me.
That I saw, I really wanted to see, and we taped it off of
TCM or
TCM,
AMC?
literally, yeah. It was TCM we taped it off of. That was one of the last movies I think I ever taped on a VHS to watch. So, but it's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite movies, too, in general. So,
all right, Levi, so that's our selections for today. Looking at all 10 of these movies, which one do you think would be the best candidate for a commentary?
I already have my double feature.
Oh, you want to do that first?
No. We'll do it in order.
Okay.
But I already have that. So I'm trying to think best for a commentary. I mean, I'm kind of thinking Once Upon a Time in America, just because I felt like we already did a commentary of it just now. But lots to think about with this movie, lots to parse, lots to criticize and love. That's mine, I think. But one that allows myth to live. The myth is everything.
So that's your commentary section. I think I might say Summer of Sam for me, because I think there's a lot to talk about. All the historical events that are depicted in this. Mm-hmm. We talked about a lot of the big actors, but then there's tons of little actors that pop up here and there. That'd be a great conversation to have. I think maybe a conversation to be had about some of these crime drama movies of the 90s and their relationship to the Tarantino movies being made around this time, and how those are two directors that, of course, do not like each other.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is an atypical Spike Lee movie while being undeniably one of his movies. So I'll say Summer of Sam.
Okay.
All right. What do you think is the best candidate for a double feature?
This sounds random, but I think I'm going to go Reefer Madness and Dr. Strangelove.
Okay.
Based on the satire.
With moral panics of a sort. This is obviously intentionally made as a satire.
Yeah, this is not a satire, but
but it's become one.
Right. I think that will be a great double feature of just like these, like I said, social films that have taken on a satirical bent, either meant or unintended. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be
that's a good one. That's good too.
But
I think for me, it would be Xanadu and Spawn, boy movie, girl movie, boy toy, girl toy. You know, like one for him, one for her. Because I
this
think
one's
both
the one
of these,
for him and that one's the one for her, right?
Yeah, well, maybe
John Leguizamo's a sex machine, as we know. But,
I just think too they're both clearly. I mean, it's funny even to just see like the covers of these juxtaposed against each other. That one is very much like they're both stylized, obviously, in terms of what they are.
Yeah.
So just one for him, one for her. Everybody's happy. You know, that would be mine.
Everybody's frightened with this one. Maybe we're happy with that one.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
all right,
lastly, I guess the movie.
If you had to watch any of these 10 movies right here, right now, what would it be? It's tough because I see a lot of things I really want to watch here.
Part of me wants to say Forbidden Planet, but I'm going to go with them. Just because I've wanted to rewatch this movie for years. You haven't seen it. So how long is it actually? Let's see. 93 minutes, so it's a breezy time. But I think mine's going to be them. By the way, we actually did watch both of the movies you did last time. Of Dillinger we watched together, and then you watched Sleepless in Seattle that I didn't watch. But we did do that. So will we do that with this one? I don't know.
Well, you didn't pick Forbidden Planet, so I will. Forbidden Planet, like I said,
it's sci-fi.
Yeah, I really liked it. I've only seen it maybe 3-ish times.
It's a white boy summer kind. It's a sci-fi summer.
I've seen this about 3-ish times, And I always liked it when I first saw it, but every time I see it, I like it a little more, and just thinking more and more about its influence and about how ahead of its time it was. Forbidden Planet would be mine. So those are our selections for today. We'll maybe just make a big fat stack of these right here.
Mine's bigger than yours because of the tape.
Because Sergio Leone just didn't have an editor, that's why. This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
And please be kind. Rewind.
I'm assuming there's a celebrity rule, like what happens on the set stays on the set. Why do you want to? Why do you engage in this tell-all about some of those people?
Well, I mean, I'm not doing it just to be a gossip, just to do that kind of thing. I mean, I'm hoping that it all adds up and there's a point to it, and that I'm also guilty of some of these conflicts. Because you're an artist. I mean, or you picture yourself as being an artist, and you want to go out there and do your best work, and there's going to be conflicts. Some people don't want to play by your rules, and you don't want to play by theirs, but you're still trying to do great work, and there's going to be fights, And then you're emotional because you're an actor, so you're already in an emotional state, so...
Well, you're obviously not worried about getting beaten up because you take shots at Seagal, and he's a big guy.
Oh, he said he's going to hit. He said he's going to punch me. I heard. He told right. He told his publicist, and his publicist told my publicist that he wants to punch me out. But he can't because he's going to be in jail soon, so I'll be fine.
He is.
Isn't he?
I don't know.
That's what I heard. I better stop talking about it.
I got cease and desist letters.
I thought he was being put away for a little while.
Your publicist is freaking out now. Joanne Settington is freaking out over it.
Is that?
No, I don't know.
She's fogging up the glass. Back away from the glass.
So, is there anyone you won't talk about because you worry about repercussions? I mean, I guess the one.
Yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, I don't want to hurt people's feelings just for the sake of hurting their feelings. But if they did me harm, I felt they did. I feel like I have the right to diss them back.
So what did Steven Seagal?
Let them do their own one-man show against me. Go ahead.
What did Steven Seagal do to you?
We were in rehearsals for Executive Decision, okay? I'm playing his master sergeant, and we come in for rehearsals, and he comes in, I'm in command. What I say is law. Anybody doesn't agree? And I was like, I started cracking up because he sounded like a retard, and he came up, and he taekwondo'd my ass against the brick wall. He went, he's 6'5" and caught me off guard, knocked all the air at me. I was like, Why? What I really wanted to say is how big and fat he is, how he runs like a girl, because he does. But I didn't, because all I could say was, why?
Right. I see now you're turning people against you because you're calling Steven Seagal all kinds of names.
But why'd he slam me against the wall?
Well, he shouldn't have done that, yeah.
We were rehearsing.
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
Yeah, but we don't need to call him names, right?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. You're looking at me like I'm crazy. All right. So I get it.
I can't let it out. It's going to build into a cancer.
It's a good thing you're letting it out.
What's the Love Doctor or the other one, Doctor?
Professor Love, yeah.